Trying to heal from a chronic illness using the typical medical model is frustrating, and even the alternative medical model sometimes doesn't offer us hope. Today's guest has a wonderful story of healing several chronic illnesses, so stay tuned. Welcome back. My name is Sarah. This is the Sarah Kleiner Wellness YouTube channel. And on today's episode, I have Rachel, who is known as Ribeye Rach over on Instagram. And she has a wonderful YouTube channel, which I'm going to link all of that in the show notes for you. But she suffered from several debilitating chronic illnesses. And I really wanted to bring her story here to share with you because the way that she was able to heal was not through regular medicine. And it wasn't even through alternative or naturopathic medicine. It was through understanding and regulating her nervous system, rewiring it, as well as using diet and nutrition to heal. So many wonderful things in this story. And again, I just wanted to bring her here to offer hope to anyone who is in the middle of a chronic illness or you have a family member with a chronic illness. I think that these stories are really, really, really important to continue sharing. So make sure you follow Rachel. All of her links again down in the show notes for you. If you enjoy this video, please do give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment. It'll help to boost it up in the algorithm, and share it with a friend or family member, especially if you are in any Facebook groups or anywhere where people view videos about this sort of topic. And I want to thank really quickly a couple of sponsors for today's episode. The first one is going to be Viva Rays. Now, I talk extensively, and we both talk extensively in this episode about the importance of your circadian health when it comes to healing a chronic illness and just your overall health in general. Viva Rays is my go-to source for protecting circadian rhythms. You can use my code YOGI to save 15% on those circadian glasses. The link will be down in the show notes for you. And the second sponsor of today's episode is Carnivore. You can use my code Carnivore uppercase Y to save 10% over on Amazon on those supplements. Absolutely love them for helping keep my bones and joints nice and healthy and stable. And this is just organ meat supplements. I don't even like to call them supplements. It's just desiccated organs. So there's no strange additives, no extra things, just these wonderful desiccated organs that are really helpful to fill in nutritional gaps in your diet. So check out Optimal Carnivore, and let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. We're really excited about today's guest. We are going to talk all about her story of healing and recovery. And so, Rachel, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting, and I haven't done like a let's talk about your story type of an interview in a while. So I think my audience will enjoy it, especially since you've been through a lot. When I look at your Instagram and you have a YouTube channel also, let's talk a little bit about your story. What happened and what it's like now.
Yeah, so when I was in college, just when I was finishing up college, I became severely ill. And so to kind of give like a brief summary of what happened, I started developing a lot of neurological symptoms, and I was getting dizzy, I was getting bad migraines, severe fatigue, brain fog, and was really just struggling. And this actually all kind of onset after an infection. I was diagnosed with mono, and things just kind of didn't get better after that. And so I continued kind of developing these chronic symptoms. And before I got sick, I was very, very active. I was a rock climbing instructor, and I was eating kind of a standard American diet at the time. And so I wasn't fueling my body properly while I was kind of, burning the candle at both ends, just doing probably way, way too much with not, taking care of my body properly and fueling my body properly. And that worked until it didn't. And I think that's kind of a lot of people's story with chronic illness. You think you're invincible, you think you can eat whatever and be fine until you aren't. And so at the time, I went down the Western medicine route for years, which I think is, what most people do. And I started seeing all sorts of doctors and specialists, and I was diagnosed with dysautonomia or POTS. I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is said to be a genetic and incurable connective tissue disease. I was diagnosed with a lot of different neurological disorders like Chiari malformation, intracranial hypertension. And basically the idea with intracranial hypertension is that the CSF pressure in your brain is very elevated and high. And so I was also diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency, chronic Lyme disease. The list kind of just goes on. And as the years went on, I just kind of kept getting diagnosed with more things, but I was trying all sorts of treatments, all sorts of medications, and I even had 5 brain and neurosurgeries and lots of hospital stays, and just I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. And so at my worst, I was essentially bedbound. I was having severe pain and symptoms every single day, all day long. I could barely tolerate even like looking at light, or noises could trigger like crazy neurological symptoms. I was having non-epileptic seizures. And so it was crazy. I honestly, I didn't even know it was possible to be as sick as I was. And so it was quite the experience, but I kind of hit a point where I was like, I'm not getting any better. And I'm going to all these top doctors. Like we literally traveled across the country to see, the top doctors on the conditions that I was diagnosed with. And yet I wasn't getting any better with what they were prescribing me and what they were, the treatment protocols that they were offering me. And I was being recommended to have, additional neurosurgeries, having, a shunt being placed in my brain and all this stuff. And it just didn't feel right anymore. And I was like, I have to go a different route, or, I don't think that I'm going to live much longer. That's kind of what it came to. Because every day I was so sick that like, I didn't know how I was going to make it through the day. And, it's a scary place to be when you're in that place and, you go to the hospital and they don't help you, but you're in an emergency situation. And so that's a scary thing. But I started just kind of looking into alternative methods of healing. I started with going to a naturopath or functional medicine doctor, and that kind of started to open my eyes to like this different side of healing. And while going to a naturopath wasn't the answer for me, it actually kind of made things worse for me. It's still like just opened my eyes to like, okay, there are things that I haven't tried. And something I always like to tell people with chronic illness is like, you haven't tried everything. Nobody's tried everything. And so you could have tried thousands of things and still not even scrape the surface of, trying everything. And so I decided to kind of look into different diets. I went vegetarian for a while, which that didn't go well. And I spent a couple months vegetarian. That didn't help me. I did, sort of like a paleo thing, and that didn't really help either. I went sugar-free. None of those really made a big difference for me. So I was also looking into at the time sort of like, have you heard of Joe Dispenza?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I started reading some of his books and like learning about how, meditation and how the mind can be such a powerful tool for healing. And that was very uncomfortable for me at first to start learning about, because it was just something so foreign to me. But I was desperate. I was willing to try anything and do anything to get better. And so that was, I think, one of the biggest things too, was just like being open-minded, being willing to try things that were out of, what I thought would work, or what I thought was, in my comfort zone. And so I was doing, research basically just from bed, and my family was really supportive and helpful. And at some points, I would say about 2 years ago, I came across some more people talking about the carnivore diet. And so I did a lot of research on that and I decided to give it a try. And it was really hard in the beginning. I think some people in the carnivore community make it seem like, oh, do carnivore for 30 days and you'll be healed of literally anything.
Right.
And that wasn't my experience. Obviously, like you can't heal from something that severe in a month.
Yeah.
But also for me, the diet was huge. Like it was a really big part of my recovery, but it certainly wasn't everything. And so as I started to see progress with carnivore, within a couple of months of doing the carnivore diet, I was able to start like cooking my own meals. We'd pull up a chair in front of the stove, and I'd be cooking my beef on the stovetop while sitting down, because I couldn't stand for very long without like starting to get really dizzy or pass out. And um, so really with carnivore, I think what I saw over the first like 4 to 5 months was just an increased capacity to do things. I was able to go out and have meals with my family and go spend time with my family and friends sometimes. And so I really started to be able to like get out of bed for hours a day, and that was huge for me. And so changing my way of eating was really, really huge. But I would say that it took me in the first like 8 months of carnivore, it probably took me from, I'd say functioning at 1%, like can't even really get out of bed, and I'm reliant on others for everything, for my care, to, maybe 10%, which is still very low, right? If you think
Yeah.
about it. For me, it felt amazing because I was like, wow, I'm doing so good. But looking back, it was like, oh, I was still really sick.
Yeah.
And so I started looking into brain retraining and nervous system regulation. And I was reading some books about that. And I came across a program called DNRS. Have you heard of that?
I haven't.
Okay, so it stands for the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, and it's just basically a brain rewiring course that like gives people with chronic illness kind of a framework of how to regulate your nervous system and to rewire your brain to get out of that fight or flight mode so that your body can start to heal. And so I decided to do that brain retraining course, and what it involved was like doing, an hour of visualizations a day where I would literally be speaking out loud past and future memories of like just being healthy and being strong and doing things that brought me joy, and just bringing in the five senses and really just trying to signal safety to my brain. And so that was really, really life changing for me to do that. And with the nervous system regulation that I've been doing, some of the principles that are involved with it are like letting go of limiting beliefs, because I think that can be a huge barrier to recovery for a lot of people. If you're told with chronic illness that you'll be sick for the rest of your life by enough doctors, you start to believe it.
Right.
And so for me, that was a big thing, was like letting go of those limiting beliefs and like starting to believe that I really could recover. And that was a turning point for me, was believing that I could fully recover, not just like improve or live, the best possible life, but believing that, I would recover. And that was a big turning point for me. And just trying my best to do whatever I could to elevate my state of emotion as much as possible. And, just work on things to like stimulate the vagus nerve, and just all sorts of things that I know you talk about a lot on your channel with biohacking and, grounding, spending time in nature, sunlight exposure, morning sunlight exposure, and limiting exposure to artificial and blue lights. And those sorts of things were all just huge for me in my healing. And so that's something I really try to focus on sharing a lot, is the importance of nervous system regulation when healing from chronic illness. Because if you're stuck in a fight or flight mode, you could be eating the perfect diet and you wouldn't be able to digest those nutrients. You wouldn't be able to heal in that
Yeah.
mode, even if you're eating a perfect diet. And so diet, yes, is very, very important, but it's not everything. And it certainly
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's been coming up a lot for me just as a practitioner. People like, I'm doing this program, I'm doing everything right. I've got the light exposure, I've got the grounding, the sunlight, the diet, everything, and I'm still not seeing progress. And then I'm like, okay, well, then we need to talk about some other things like
Right.
how's your stress right now? That's usually what I ask. And then I'll get, okay, I have like the other day is my mother is dying and I'm like the primary caregiver. And then my sister has been checked into a psych ward and I've had to deal with that. And I'm like, well, that's why you're not losing weight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, some things happen, they're out of our control, but we have to give ourselves grace when we're in those like super stressful situations. And then, like you said, have these tools to get our body out of fight, flight, and out of that like scare, kind of the cell danger response that we're in. Like if we feel like we're, our body's under threat, it's not going to heal. It's not going to let go of excess weight. It's going to try to keep you safe and protected. And so, yeah, it's a tough one for people to hear, but it sounds like that was a big part of your journey. I know the carnivore diet was a big part of it, but which would you say was, I mean, the most helpful, do you think, if you had to choose?
Honestly, I would say it's a close toss up between the two, but I would say the nervous system and brain retraining work was more important
Yeah.
than diet.
What did that look like exactly? It's just like things that you're listening to, watching, or mantras you're repeating, or techniques involved. Like, what does that look like exactly?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning before, I do a lot of visualization. So the idea with visualization is that your brain doesn't know the difference between visualizing and reality. And so, like for me, I really struggled to walk. Like I would get
Mhm.
severe symptoms, pain, dizziness. I pass out sometimes, and so I really couldn't stand for longer than like a minute, and I could only walk for a couple minutes. And so I would visualize just walking to the end of my driveway and feeling really healthy and strong, just like going through every part of my body, like feeling healthy, feeling strong, feeling capable. And yeah, just bringing in the five senses, doing everything I could to signal safety to my brain. And I do quite a bit of meditation as well, and somatic practices. That's been something that's been really helpful for me. And um, I try my best whenever I do these nervous system regulation techniques. I try to do them while I'm outside because I feel like that's
Mhm.
just even more added benefit.
Oh, yeah.
To be outside and get that that healing effect of being in nature and being in sunlight. And so that's kind of what it has looked like for me. In the beginning, I would just when I was just starting, I would before I went to sleep at night, I would tell myself, like I'm safe, I'm healing, and just kind of repeat positive mantras and really try to convince my brain that I'm safe, that I'm healing. And I think something that a lot of people struggle with is like even like the idea that they can get better.
Yeah.
Um and so that wasn't something that happened overnight for me. I it's to change a core belief takes a long time. It takes a lot of exposures. And um so I just at first it was like, okay, I'm just gonna let the idea of that um sit and just be able to consider the possibility of like, okay, maybe I can get better. And that turned into eventually like, I know I can get better.
Mm.
And um so yeah, those are kind of the some of the main things that I've done for brain rewiring. I also often will like record visualizations that I speak out loud, and I'll listen to them if I'm on a plane or if I'm trying to go to sleep and I can't get to sleep. It'll help to calm my nervous system. And yeah, it's helped so much. So
Did you work with any practitioners or did you kind of just figure all this stuff out on your own?
For the most part, I didn't. I never worked with any sort of coach or practitioner for nervous system or nutrition related work. I've kind of always been like a figure it out yourself type person, and so I had the time to put in research. I wasn't able to work. I wasn't really, for the most part, able to get out of bed, and so I had the time to research and to like, and my family helped me out as well, and we just I kind of figured it out. So I know that for a lot of people it can be really beneficial to work with a coach or a practitioner, but I feel blessed that I was kind of able to figure it all out on my own. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and I know I have people that listen to the show that maybe they don't have the funds to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a coach or practitioner. And especially if you've already been through it with the medical system, you've probably already spent a ton of money on doctors, and then to go, the naturopathic route, and that is super expensive. And yeah,
yeah,
so it's, yeah.
I think something that like one of the biggest messages that I try to share is that our bodies were designed to heal, and the most important
Mm,
part of healing comes within, from within. And so, while all these different, testing and practitioners and supplements, whatever, diet, all these things like can help, I still think the most important part of healing is free. It's what comes from within. So
yeah. I agree. I mean, that's definitely was my story of like spending all this money to try to get pregnant, and nothing that I was doing medically was working. And then I went the functional route with all those tests and
mhm.
supplements and all that. And I didn't get any better from that, just more broke. And it was like, what
Yep.
I did was basically figure things out on my own, and get back to that like, and a lot of that for my story was a lot of it was that was that final step, was that the mindset part of actually believing it was possible, um, and
Yeah,
I
and
think,
sometimes it even takes like letting go of so desperately like researching and so desperately like hyper focusing on every little aspect of, what you eat, what you do during the day, and just hyper focusing on healing itself
mhm.
can inhibit healing, really.
I feel
And
like people start to identify with their diagnosis.
yes.
And I
Oh,
know I would love to hear you talk about how you overcame that, because it's like, I mean, when I was dealing with infertility, I would like go on Instagram and say, like, I'm a fertility warrior, and there's nothing wrong with that.
right.
But people allow it to just like become who they are, And so, how did you avoid? I mean, you had some like really serious stuff going on. Like, how did you avoid letting that like become like who you are and identifying by your diagnosis? I hope you're enjoying today's episode with Rachel. Again, all of her information is going to be linked down in the show notes for you. And I wanted to thank one more sponsor of today's episode, that is going to be Upgraded Formulas. You can use my code YOGI or YOGI12 to save over at Upgraded Formulas. Now, this is a really, really wonderful way to understand the mineral balance within your body. Most of us have a mineral imbalance, and this is a really wonderful way to figure out what that looks like. A blood test is only going to tell you what's happening a little snapshot in time. The hair tissue mineral analysis can actually let you know what's been going on over the last 60 to 90 days. I also recommend getting a consultation so that you can actually understand those results. Sometimes they can be a little bit confusing, but this is just a really wonderful way, again, to get to that mineral balance information in your body and really get to the bottom of it, figure it out. So check out Upgraded Formulas. Use my code YOGI12 or YOGI if you've already used that one before. And let's jump back into today's show.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I know for a lot of people with chronic illness, it can be very validating to get a diagnosis when, you've been searching for so long and finally, you're like, I have an answer. And it was that way for me. It felt validating to get, a diagnosis, especially like when I was diagnosed with the connective tissue disorder, because I was like, oh, this is out of my control and there's nothing I can do. But in a way that's so damaging to like, and so it felt validating at the time because it almost felt like it wasn't on me. Like it wasn't,
Right.
something I couldn't have control. It just happened. And now I feel very differently about that. But at the time it felt validating. And so it was definitely a process to let go of that. And part of it for me, I was in all the Facebook groups, all the support groups. And while I met, lifelong friends through those groups and like have such a heart for those people, I had to step away from that.
Hmm.
And I was actually sharing my story before I started really healing, on a separate Instagram account and YouTube account. And I had to step away from that Instagram because I
Hmm.
couldn't keep seeing people in the hospital. I couldn't keep seeing
Hmm.
people having surgeries, having treatments, going to the neurosurgeons that I went to and then just not getting better. And
Yeah.
the reality of it was that none of those people in those groups were really getting better with these treatments that, I went through too. And so I think in a way, like stepping away from that was an important part of my healing because I needed to be surrounded by people who believed that they could heal and who were working towards healing. And I just being exposed to that was so triggering for me, especially like as I was really starting to heal. And so I just had to completely step away from those groups as much as, I really cared about those people. It wasn't serving me
Yeah.
anymore. And it wasn't it was just such an environment filled with fear and negativity.
Hmm.
And it's understandable because it's scary and it's hard to be that sick, but it's not an environment that's conducive to healing.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because I think it can be tempting when we get a diagnosis of some sort or we're struggling with a problem of some sort to start joining the groups and doing all the things that we're trying to commiserate and have community with other people, which I think can be helpful. But then when you just allow it to consume your entire life of like you're always in the groups and you're always looking at their page and their journey, and it's like, and then you're like, oh, let me share my journey. And then
Yeah.
I think if we want to heal, yes, we acknowledge we have a problem, obviously, but we don't let it become who we are, right?
Yeah. And even being in those groups and being constantly exposed to people's experience with illness, it strengthens those neural pathways in your brain
Mm,
for illness, for continuing to be sick. And I think it makes people sicker. And
yeah, I think so
it's
too.
really a sad thing.
Yeah, it's tough because I have friends now that they've seen me go through like the whole fertility struggle, and they're like, oh, what advice can you give me? And I'm like, you have to stop identifying as someone who can't get pregnant, like, and because I have a couple of friends that's what they do. Their whole Instagram account is about their fertility journey, and it's about how many pregnancies they've lost and all this stuff, and it's just like every
Yeah.
post is like some big emotional drawn out thing. And yeah, there's a place where we need to express ourselves when it's hard, right?
It's hard.
Especially if you're chronically ill, you need to have support and you need to be able to express yourself. But again, if you, like you said, it strengthen those neural pathways to continue to like reinforce it over and over and over again. It can definitely be tough. And so I imagine you had a good support system at home as well, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I actually got married during my time of chronic illness, and so that was crazy. But I actually was at my worst after we got married, so it was good timing that we were able to like have a wedding and stuff. But um, but yeah, my family has been really supportive. We ended up having to move across the country to get support of my family because my husband was working full time and it wasn't even safe for me to be alone at the house by myself while he
Oh,
was
wow.
at work because I was so sick having all these non-epileptic seizure episodes and just
Oh my
like not
gosh.
super safe to just walk around the house on my own. So
Yeah.
we moved to North Carolina, and my family has been very helpful and supportive. And luckily now I don't need that extra support, but it's great to have them here anyway. So
Yeah. That is really great. And so how did, I guess, carnivore, obviously, I think that diet is important when we look at healing ourselves.
Right.
So how did carnivore fit into all of this, and what does your diet kind of look like now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely am glad that I did strict carnivore, and I did do strict carnivore, I think, for around a year and a half. And just in the
Mm.
last like 4 months or so, I've kind of started to do more of, I guess you would call it maybe an animal based approach or a Weston A.
Mm-hmm.
Price foundation based approach. And I mean, changing my eating changed my life. Like, there's no doubt about it. My family saw it as we were doing it, and so they were very supportive of that. And I really just learned so much about how important it is how we fuel our bodies. Like, the food that we eat is our fuel. And so that's a huge lesson that I learned, because I just, even when I was really sick, I just was told by doctors it didn't matter. And with my dysautonomia and POTS, they often recommend having a lot of salt. And doctors would literally just tell
Mm.
me to eat a bunch of French fries, or eat a bunch of potato chips, because that would up my
Yeah.
electrolytes and sodium. I'm like, I could just put salt on a steak, but like I would even ask, like, should I change my diet? And they'd say, no, just eat as much as you possibly can. And something that I didn't bring up yet was that I've actually gained 50 pounds. And so I was very underweight. And
50, because you look very, very, very healthy.
yeah,
Wow.
so that was another thing that I was really nervous about with carnivore, because everybody was talking about losing weight, and I
Mm.
couldn't afford to lose any more weight. And um, so I was able to find a couple people that were able to gain weight, and obviously I was able to gain weight on it, which was great. But I think most of the weight really started to come on when I started to do the nervous system regulation along with the diet, because I think it was then that I was really starting to like absorb the nutrients that I was getting in the
Mm.
best way, and I was able to actually put on the weight that I needed to. But yeah, I was actually almost put on a feeding tube several times.
Wow.
And I was barely able to eat. And literally, when I started carnivore, I was force feeding myself. Like, every bite I took, I hated it. I was like,
Mm.
I'm doing this because I want to get better, but I just, I, it was so hard to eat in the beginning. And that was something that really improved as well. Um, and has improved even more since really doing the brain retraining and nervous system work. My digestion has just improved so much. And um, so, yeah, at this point, I would say I'm eating about, uh, gosh, 90% meat and eggs, 90% carnivore. And I've been adding in just like a little bit of, um, you know, grains, properly prepared grains like organic rice cooked in bone broth, or boiled potatoes. And I always make sure to prioritize my animal protein and fat if I'm going to be having any carbs, just to make sure to stabilize my blood sugar. And it's actually gone really well. And some people, like, when I shared about changing my diet and adding in some carbs and going away from a strict carnivore diet, some people thought, I wanted to do it just because I wanted variety. And actually, the reality of it was that I just was struggling to digest so much meat, and it just didn't feel right anymore. For a while
Mm-hmm.
there, I was like, I could eat like a whole chuck roast, and I was just craving the connective tissue in it. And I got so excited for my meals, and just felt like I could just eat meat forever. And then I got to a point where I was just like, this doesn't feel right anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it actually has been helpful. And um it's, I would honestly rather be strict carnivore because it's so easy, like, to
Yeah,
cook.
it is.
Very
Yeah.
simple. But it just kind of felt natural, and it felt right to be adding in just a little bit of other foods. And I also had some local fruits and raw honey and stuff like that. So I'd say I'd probably having like 30 to sometimes up to like 80 grams of carbs a day, and have been doing well with it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think people get scared when you when you talk about introducing foods. Like, it can be a really scary thing for people. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I got to as well. I saw, and my thyroid wasn't super happy after 2 years of carnivore also, and so the carbs helped me just adding them in a couple days a week and just switching
Right.
things up like that. But yeah, you get to a point.
Mostly, how do you source your, or where do you get your carbs from? Is it like raw milk or, um,
I try to stay with like local seasonal foods the best that I can. I don't always get, I'm not 100% perfect on that, but I don't ever eat anything that's like from a can or a box. Like it's
yes.
all whole foods, like
Yeah.
berries or an apple, like a food that comes from the ground, it's grown under sunlight,
Yeah.
no powdered things in boxes, things like that.
Mhm.
My body just, I don't feel good. And then I kind of know what I know about nutrition. And I'm like, it's not a natural, healthy thing for us to do. Our body doesn't really know what to do with it. It's a confusing signal. So,
Yeah, I love
but
eating locally and seasonally, and yeah, I love that.
yeah, I think it can be helpful. Have you seen anything like any symptoms come back? Because I know a lot of people that say, for instance, have seizures,
Mhm.
they do well with staying on a keto diet, or even now I'm seeing some people say they can do like a modified Atkins diet and keep seizures away. Have you seen anything like neurologically come back at all since adding in carbs?
I actually haven't. And what was interesting
Great.
about it is in the beginning, it was like I almost didn't notice anything at all. And it just felt so weird because I had only been eating meat for so long that I was almost scared to
Mhm.
eat something else. And I think it was a
Yeah.
good thing for me, like mentally, to just be like, it's fine, Rachel. Like you can have a little bit of, a local strawberry and you're not going to get sick again. Like it's totally fine. And I think that was a really good thing for me mentally as well as physically. But just knowing that like my body could handle it. And I think all the nervous system work and the brain retraining work that I've done has probably been why I haven't had any issues with it. And I think there's just a lot of fear in the carnivore space. Like everybody's like, oh, plants are trying to kill you. And it's just like so intense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I just need to step away from that because
Yeah. Me too.
this, it was just a little too much for me because I'm like, you know what? Like if you're mostly eating meats and you're having some local fruit and local food, other foods, like you should be fine. You should be able to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, it's actually gone really well.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, our microbiome in summertime changes with the light, so that we're able to digest and break down the more simple sugar fruits, and it changes in the wintertime. So if you're exposing yourself to the natural light in your environment, your microbiome will shift and change to accommodate that. And I think that's a conversation that gets lost in the carnivore community. It's like, it's not so black and white.
Right.
And I think for people like you and that have these chronic health conditions, it can be really helpful to have a period of like strict carnivore for a while. It was for me. I think a lot of things healed for me in the 2 years that I stayed strict carnivore.
Yeah.
And even Dr. Chris Palmer, I'm not sure if you've seen any of his work at all.
A little bit.
He and I talked about that, of just like, even people with these severe like mental problems like schizophrenia and bipolar going keto for like a year or two, they're able to sometimes bring in some, seasonal foods and maintain the healing that they've gotten, because that period of intense ketosis and just being way off those foods was able to help heal them. And so I mean, it's in the literature also that this can be a thing. So I think it can be dangerous to go into like this kind of group think of like everything's trying to kill you. And
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's important to stay open-minded and to,
yeah,
I was glad that I didn't brand my whole, you know, social media around being carnivore because
yeah.
I didn't know if that was what I was going to stick with forever. And but then at a certain point I really did think that that was going to be my diet, and it kind of
Hmm.
almost started to like identify with it as
Yeah.
well. And so I think it was good for me to kind of break away from that. And now I'm just like, okay, I eat real nourishing foods. I focus on the foods that make me feel best, which is meat and eggs and
Right.
raw dairy. And I focus on that. But I just trust that if I eat these nourishing foods, that my body is going to continue healing, and then I'm going to be strong and healthy, and I'm not going to, hyper focus too much on what I'm eating. And I actually think within the nervous system space, a lot of people kind of like to prescribe to the idea that if you rewire your brain, then you can eat whatever you want and you just go back to what you want. And that just never sat right with me, because I saw how much my health transformed before starting the brain retraining with my diet. And I see what I eat as a part of my nervous system regulation, because what you eat wires your brain. And processed foods, seed oils, refined sugars, those are damaging to the brain and the nervous system. And while I have seen people heal with just brain retraining alone from autoimmune diseases and stuff, which I think is incredible, I think those people, might be more susceptible to having issues in the future. And, it's like they're working against themselves if they're eating all this junk food. It's just, I don't know how sustainable that's going to be. And I just think it's like so important. What you eat is your fuel, and it's hard because I think some people can actually like develop eating disorders around, even like a carnivore diet.
Oh, definitely. 110%. Yes. Yeah.
And so it's hard to know where the balance is, because, I've been in situations where we're going over to a friend's house to have brisket, and I'm like hyper like worried that they sprayed their grill with canola oil spray, and I'm like, is that really going to wreck my health to have like a little bit of that? Like, probably not.
Yeah.
Like, it should be. And so I think that is just not an unhealthy way to look at it. And it's hard to know, because when like how bad seed oils are, and how bad these certain foods are for you, you don't want to eat them. You don't want to go out to eat. You don't want to put them in your body. But at the same time, it's like, okay, our bodies, we have room for some margin of error. Like, we can handle, not being 100% perfect all the time.
Right.
It's a hard balance.
Exactly. It is. And it's, people that have histories of eating disorders tend to, I think, have a harder time with that more flexible point of view. But yeah, for me, I mean, I definitely have had multiple eating disorders over my life, and doing carnivore was helpful to kind of quiet a lot of that noise down, and it was easy. But at a certain point, it was like, this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life. I just got to that point. It wasn't healthy for me to continue doing it. It wasn't helping my hormones or my fertility or any of that stuff. So I had to learn how to add in some foods. And I see people struggling with that. And it's like, yeah, once you understand, your light environment, keeping a healthy diet most of the time, you really get sleep dialed in, and doing some of the stuff like you're doing with the nervous system retraining. If you have something like, I had a client over the weekend, she's like, okay, I had a bunch of pizza on Friday, but I slept really good. And then I didn't even feel bad the next day. And I was like, yeah, because you've been dialing it in for months now. And so when you really have things dialed in, I don't want anyone going out and eating a ton of pizza. Some people, that's going to be a really terrible idea. But if you do end up doing that, it's not going to ruin your life for the next week, and you don't have to be terrified of it.
And if
like you said,
crazy reactions to, even like fruit or something like that, that to me is a sign that, they haven't healed, that they have, a way to go before they're healed.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, if you're having something like a piece of fruit and it makes you horribly ill, then there's another layer of healing that needs to happen. And it could be nervous system, like you said. It's something in the body doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel right, and there's a little bit more work to do. Doesn't mean you should never eat fruit for the rest of your life and it's off limits, but yeah. And that's the same thing. I have an issue with people that I don't have an issue with them. I have a lot of compassion for them, but they're like, if I have carbs, if I do carb cycling, then I can't stop eating carbs for like days on end. And I'm like, well, this is more more healing we need to continue to look at, because you should be able to have a baked potato and not, eat 6 more of them, have a baked potato on a Thursday and then not have to continue that for days on end. Because we're not telling people to go and eat like pecan pie or candy or ice cream. We're talking about like root vegetables or an apple, these types of foods. It shouldn't trigger you to go completely off the rails.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So what are the resources that you used for the brain retraining? I know you mentioned one technique, but I guess if anyone's listening and they're curious, they maybe want to look at some of this stuff for themselves. What were some of the steps that you took?
Yeah, so there are lots of different brain retraining courses available. The one that I started with is called DNRS, so it stands for the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. I also went through the GUPTA program, which is just another brain retraining course, which I really enjoyed as well. There's one called Primal Trust, which I have not personally gone through, but I've heard really good things about that. It's very like holistic and just all aspects of nervous system regulation with somatic practices and brain rewiring and all sorts of good things. But as for books, I'd say Joe Dispenza is great. There's a book called Wired for Healing by Annie Hopper. That's a great book. And The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Doidge. That's a great book. And yeah, that's kind of the main thing. And then I've just kind of looked up different somatic practices. You can literally just go on YouTube and search for somatic practices, and that's kind of how I've learned about that. And just sort of, incorporate things at your own pace and whatever resonates the most with you. And I think sometimes when people have chronic illness, they feel like they need to be perfect with everything. And something I try to emphasize is, like, we're not going to be perfect about it. And if there's this protocol with brain wiring and, you do 30 minutes a day, not the hour, like, it's okay, like, try again tomorrow. And it's still going to be making a difference. And so I say, take what resonates with you and leave the rest, because some of these brain rewiring programs do have like some cheesy and cringy moments, but like like for me, it was completely life-changing, and just the principles that I learned from those programs really have been an important part of my recovery. I think, sometimes people in the brain rewiring space, they'll say, oh, DNRS healed me or the GUPTA program healed me, but it's like, that's not the right idea. It's like that program gives you the tools to heal yourself. And that's what's important is, the most important part of healing does come from within. So
definitely. I love that. I so much about that. And I think it can really inspire a lot of hope in people. And I know your spiritual life is a big part of things as well. Would you say?
Yes, definitely. My faith has been a huge anchor for me throughout my chronic illness journey. And I think for a while there, I kind of felt like I kind of had to let God's will happen. And if that was to be sick, then, I would just have to accept that. But as I learned more, I really felt like God was leading me to the things that would help me to heal. And it wasn't like this big miraculous healing, like where, I just get better and someone says a prayer over me and I'm better. No, it wasn't anything like that. Like it was me putting the effort and God leading me to the things that helped me to heal. So yeah, I don't think I would have made it through all those years without my faith. So
I love that. That's wonderful. Well, what's next for you? Are you planning on helping other people? Are you just going to keep sharing information? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I actually just finished a brain and nervous system coaching program, and I'm not taking clients at the time, and I don't know if I ever will, but I really just want to keep expanding my knowledge and keep learning so that I can share with as many people as I possibly can that healing is possible from chronic illness. And that's the biggest message that I want to drive home, is that healing is possible. And so many people are being told by doctors that, they're going to be sick for the rest of their life and they can't recover. And I don't know, I hate to think of anybody in a place like I was and just feeling so hopeless, feeling like they're going to be sick forever. And that's why I just want to shout from the rooftops what I've learned. And I just want to share with as many people as will listen that, recovery from chronic illness is possible. And my story isn't unique. That's something I always like to share too, is, I didn't just get lucky. Like, so many people are recovering. I've talked to so many people that have been in worse places than I was that are recovering. And so, yeah, the body was designed to heal. And that's just something that I want to continue sharing.
I love that. This has been awesome. And where can people find you if they want to follow you and just look on with your story?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm just at Ribeye Rach, and YouTube at Ribeye Rach as well. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with me today. I'm so excited to share this with my audience, and I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Great chatting with you.